It's fantastic to be here, and I couldn't have asked for a better panel to have this conversation. As we're reflecting on the topic today, and my team, we do a lot of stuff on FinTech research. We're just looking at data. As a country, we're close to some 100,000 startups with 100 plus unicorns as we stand today. More importantly, in my mind, we have learned to work with a lot of clients and customers who are global in nature. A lot of FinTech industry in India is built around the digital public infrastructure, which again is going global. We have got investments from VCs and PEs who again are global. So one way or the other, we are seeing the exposure, or even in nudges in many cases, interest to go global coming in. And while we were chatting with our fellow panelists, each one of them is on the journey of going global. So it's a perfect opportunity for us to discuss what will it take for us to be a dominant force globally. Global startups are looking at India. How can we be a lot more confident as well as impactful in the global scheme of things? But we'll take it with a pinch of salt. As I was chatting earlier, I did feel our classical financial services industry has been a little shy in going global. India Inc. itself has been shy in going global, and all the investors also saying India itself is a big opportunity, so why do you want to global? So that's probably the dilemma that we are in, which we will navigate. But let's get started fairly quickly, and Madhu, probably will start with you. A little bit of your intro and your interest in going global, and probably the opening question, which I'll open to each one of the panelists, is some nuance on what does going global mean? What are the geographies which you think are of interest? I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, thanks Vivek. Fantastic to be here. And my name is Madhu. I represent M2P. We are a FinTech infrastructure business. 10 years of running it, and last 5 years we have been trying to go global. So we've had our share of experience in terms of some of the aspects that you spoke about, where we were shy to begin with in terms of how we would talk about going global, and to a realization point where today most folks, when I meet them after a while, they ask me, how is the relocation to Dubai looking like, right? While I have physically not relocated, it just feels that, so because you have to be there in a lot of these markets, you have to really invest in some of the markets to be seen operating from that market and be executing. Also, purely as India Inc., there are two parts, right? There is one, there are these large, listed public companies on the IT side, IT services led, which have charted its own path, largely led by the markets in the West, and then looking at other markets. But there's a big gap between those large companies and very small body shopping work that happens, where it's like 100-member team sitting out in Pune and doing some work for someone, right? But there is a gap in terms of how the technology can fill, or companies that can fill. There's also a massive trust deficit that is there when you go international. So if you're a small FinTech, it's super hard to convince somebody sitting outside to say that the franchises that they are underwriting is not something that they should worry about. And the fact that their experiences in the past of working with an Indian company where it was small and probably didn't have a great outcome is actually a scar that is there. It will take some time for us to go, but having said which, I think a lot of things that are going well for us, I think we have taken a lead as a country in terms of DPI, the digital public infrastructure. So India is today looked at, people have stopped asking, will the next Google come out of India? I think in some ways DPI has been that answer, where we have been able to, at a billion people population scale, you are able to solve for challenges that are out there. I think that shift has come out in the last 4 or 5 years, where how has India solved for, let's say, an inclusion problem? Things that resonate really well is what we see. Yeah, I'll probably pause here.
Ashok, your thoughts?
Yeah. So I'm the CEO of IDFY. IDFY, essentially, what we do is we do KYC. If you have done your KYC at Paytm, Ola Money, PhonePe, HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, we have your data. We can do a lot with it. But jokes aside, we do delete the data, so don't worry. But what, in terms of our international expansion, we've been trying this for the last couple of years. Southeast Asia is a big market for us. The way we look at it is large populations, transforming into digital. Like what we want to get into is we want to be the first player in that space, in that market. We don't want to be a me too in a developed market, because then we want to be number one and number two. So we choose our countries based on how we can dominate a particular market. So Southeast Asia is great because Southeast Asia kind of looks up to India, saying that, hey, we want to do kind of the same things that India has done. So that's one big trigger for us. Similar kind of geographies, like we are present in Indonesia, Philippines, and MENA region, and for the right reasons, right? India tech is respected. People are looking at India very differently than the way they looked at us maybe 10 years ago. As a services shop today, in the last 5 years, a lot of product companies which have expanded out of India, right? And that's definitely created a perception that we are world class. We have the scale. Just to kind of give you some context, as a KYC player today, we do close to about 65 million authentications a month. We are by far not the only guys with that kind of scale in India. There are 3-4 of us. If you look at the US, the biggest ID player in the country is probably half our size in terms of volume. It's crazy to think that, right? We always look up to US thinking they are the innovators. In the last 6 years, 7 years, India, especially in the financial services space, we dominate. We are so far ahead of the rest of the world, and the world has seen that. And I think it's our opportunity now to expand out and do what the Chinese and the US did for the rest of the world. It's India's time, in my opinion.
Awesome.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Avinash. I'm the co-promoter, MD and CEO of a company called Zaggle. We're a bit of an outlier. We're a listed SaaS FinTech, and we got listed last September, and we're profitable. So we've been looking at opportunities to go global and looking at this very methodically. And the usual suspects in terms of regions, the US, GCC, Southeast Asia. But one of the things as we are, entering into these markets and some of these regions and considering it, we're realizing that the difference that has come in is 25 years ago when I started my career as a software techie, India was known for its cost arbitrage. Today we are known for our innovation arbitrage. The kind of scale that Ashok mentioned and Madhu mentioned that we are able to process and the way we are able to do it, whether it's a UPI or whether it's plethora of things that we do on the back end, it's something that the world is looking up to and acknowledging that yes, India is able to do it at a scale and in a manner that literally nobody else has been able to do it. And part of the credit, at least in our space, I'd give to our customers. Indian customers are so demanding that they force you as either you won't survive or you will figure out how to give 10x value to your customers. And as the Uber CEO mentioned, India is a tough market, but it's once you go through that grind or ragada, whatever you want to call it, right? You come out so rugged. I wouldn't even say polished. I would say you were toughened. That you're then able to showcase a lot of things to different markets, which to you are, as Ashok mentioned, routine. To others are like, mind-boggling. So I think we have a great opportunity to take the India story global. I think in the next decade you'll see tons of Indian fintechs, especially SaaS companies, doing that in a big way across the world.
Fantastic. Now, shifting the gears and probably making it relevant, and I will come to each one of you for your experience in one specific market that we spoke of. Madhu, maybe the MENA market, which Dubai you started with. Help us understand the nuances of that market. What have you seen? And anyone else who is thinking in this room of exploring further, what can they take away? And Ashok, probably I'll come to you for Southeast Asia. Avinash, we'll discuss US probably as 3 example markets, but where to start with?
Yeah, I think our intent when we started was obviously, we were a bootstrap business then when we looked at other markets. So largely aimed at de-risking the business. A lot of our, all eggs were in India as a market, and we were, powering a lot of fintechs. What if some regulatory nuking happens? So, we started out our international very casually, but I think when we went into those markets, when we started working with some of them, in the first wave, obviously, many of them did not want to work with us, surprisingly, because one, we were not, we didn't have capital backing. And the reasons I pointed out in my earlier sort of, opening remark, right? But as we started seeding some of these markets where we realized that in a lot of the markets, you need to have that local context in terms of, you could have product and engineering built out in India, but how do you have implementation or, the frontline BD localized to an extent where it almost feels like a local company, right? Although they know that this is, an Indian company and all that. So I think the thing that we took was we realized that the importance to have more of a hub and spoke model where we set up a base in Dubai. That then allowed us to basically have people who are, it was a heterogeneous mix of nationalities, and then you are looked up as somebody who's part of that region. And that's really important because if you are going into let's say, FinTech association in Middle East, you need to be part of that, group to actually resonate well and be doing business, least of all, right? So I think having that ability to stay invested for a year, and we've realized that each market has its own regulatory nuances. There are a fair bit of, although you could, conveniently we call GCC as one block. Each country has its own minor cultural nuances, and there are, regulatory aspects that come in. So every market takes, at least in the financial services space, at least a year of, going in, settling in, understanding local network connections and things like that. And then you hit your sales cycle, right? So it's a minimum of 2 years before you actually see rubber hitting the road. And that's a time investment that you've got to make, right? So what we've realized over the last 3-4 years of executing in the Middle East is that has become now a template where if you have to do ASEAN, then what's the best Dubai equivalent in the ASEAN market? Is it Malaysia? Is it Indonesia? So you have to pick those markets where, you will have a heterogeneous mix of, population from those countries be part of your team, and then you be able to sort of execute. And also there's a fair degree of, aspects around, like for example, in Egypt, when we have a business, we need to have the sales guy to be able to connect locally, right? That's really important. I can't port somebody from India and say, go, start doing business development, right? Yeah. So it might have some success, but I think if you have to build a sustained business, you'll have to really invest in that, and it takes time for us to, especially in a B2B kind of infrastructure space, it takes that effort and time to sort of, actually, come out with results. So yeah, I mean, how do you, in summary, how do you actually create a hub and spoke model? How do you stay invested? Is how, I would sort of say it.
One quick follow-through, Madhu. How do you think, and probably that's the same question I ask other panelists also, how do you see the brand permission for Indian SaaS product companies there?
I think there is a fair bit of work that's happening from Indian companies in the recent past. For example, Zoho is a big player in the region, so they are looked up to as a brand of promise. So I think the aspects around, this again goes back to the point that are you invisible, right? So if you're going to be there, so it's a very high-touch market across the board, Middle East as an example. To contrary to that, like Ashok can allude to this, Philippines is like very straightforward. You can actually go down to getting down to doing business. They don't care whether you're locally there or not. Very, very different to, very, very contrasting to how Middle East operates. So therefore, there is a need to actually be locally there, but I think there is acceptance of India tech which is happening. I think area for us to improve is actually about, how brand India can get built out. I think we've got the best brand ambassador in the Prime Minister going out and making it easier for us. But I think that remains to be an area where I think we have to, collectively have to do a lot more work.
Sure. Ashok, maybe Southeast Asia?
Yeah, so like I said, we embarked on this journey about a couple of years back. made a few mistakes. First of all, I want to give context, right? We are a large enterprise business. We are not a MSME business or SME business. SME businesses, largely you can drive that through SEO, SMM, and I don't think necessarily presence 100% is required when you're running a business like a Freshdesk or a Zoho. Your ticket sizes are small, SMEs consume online, right? So specifically my point here is largely on large enterprise because that's what I understand. I'm not making a comment around, let's say, a CRM player.
It is true for most of the panel today, right?
Right. So just qualifying that,
Yeah.
right? But exactly like Madhu said, they have to see you as a local. And to that effect, what we have done is set up a Philippines entity. We have set up an Indonesia entity. We are there any given day. There's at least 2 people from India who are there, or in Philippines case, now we have local sales guys as well. Philippines is easy from a culture nuance perspective. They love Indians. They're very direct. Very American and Indian in that sense, like, there are low context societies and high context societies. Low context societies are like US and somewhat like what I would call the new generation of India, not my father's generation was probably very high context, won't tell you in your face that they don't like you and things like that, but current India is not the same. It's very American in that sense. So Philippines is like that. Indonesia, exact opposite, right? Indonesia, they will never tell you anything to your face. They'll suddenly start speaking Bahasa on the table, which never happens in Philippines, right? Second, in Indonesia, what I noticed was they like to get very personal, very, very quickly. So the first conversation I had with this large bank, the VP, I think VP business, ended up talking about the fight he had with his wife. The first meeting, I mean, right? And he's expecting me to also tell him that I also have trouble with my wife, which all of us do, obviously. but the level of detail that went into, I was feeling uncomfortable. And I thought that was just on one-off. Two conversations, next conversation, same exact thing. And then people want to have this conversation. So what we realized very quickly is this: if you're not looking at these countries from a cultural aspect as well, they don't feel that you're part of their world. And if you're not part of their world, then you're not going to make it in the sense, at least as a large enterprise business. It's going to be very hard to pull off something if you're just fly by night, right? And a lot of the American counterparts of ours did that. A Jumio Checker, they just have a US entity and trying to enter into India, into Philippines, and in India, the four KYC player, competition of theirs. There are 4 of us here. We beat the shit out of them, right? Sorry. Pardon the thing that Americans couldn't enter, and that's what will happen in these local economies if we don't behave like a local. And I think that's a broad
Interesting.
point.
Cool. Avinash, your experiences of exploring the US market?
Yeah. I'll just dip into what we are experiencing in Zaggle, as well as dovetail into my early experiences pre-Zaggle as a consultant, where I traveled to a lot of the places that Madhu and the Indonesia was very relevant, spent a lot of time there. So you're absolutely right, the local context is important. I think some markets it's less important. The US is probably, what we are finding is not as important. US also, finding your ICP is very important. In absence of that, you'll be lost. US is too big a market. So your ideal customer profile becomes extremely important. Are you targeting SMEs? Which region? What type of industries? What size? Why would they want to, work with you? A lot of that work you can do sitting here in India. You don't need to be physically present in the US at the get-go. Unlike some of the other markets that Madhu and Ashok mentioned. The other piece also about the US, which we like, is as a SaaS company, about 60% of SaaS software worldwide plus is consumed by the US, right? 60. So if you are a SaaS company, you really need to be in the US sooner or later. You just cannot say that we're going to skirt that market and try and operate elsewhere. The willingness to work with newer players is also probably much higher than some of the high context, as Ashok beautifully put it, countries. The US, we are seeing in our initial reads, much more willing to try out products, and they are very positively dispensed towards India by and large. I think some of the things that have happened in terms of China plus one, etc., has further enhanced that. The Indian diaspora in the region obviously has played a very good part. The way Indians have conducted themselves in probably last 4 or 5 decades in the US is a good example for the Americans to look at us positively. So there are a lot of tailwinds. Of course, it's a red ocean market. It's highly competitive. But those are the prices that you pay. The last part that I want to touch on, Vivek, is the low regulation that typically US has that allows, for example, you don't need a local partner in the US. You can go and set up shop in 2 days, literally, right? And you can choose your state basis, all your considerations that you have. You may be incorporated in a particular state for tax reasons, and operate out of California or whatever, Texas or Arizona. And the large parts of the US which we miss out because we either look at the West Coast and only the East Coast, but large parts of the US where there's tons of opportunity, the Midwest, where I spent tons of time in Chicago, or places like Arizona, Texas, where there's tons of business, and they are not necessarily targeted by the hyper-funded US companies, because they want to be present where their, VCs are, which is probably the Bay Area or New York. So, so there are these sort of opportunities that we are seeing in terms of which geography also that you operate in can be quite useful.
Understood. Quick follow through. While we spoke about some attractive markets that you consider, one quick question and reactions from any or all of you. I don't hear too much of Europe in this conversation. Any reason?
Europe? Look,
and just as a context, I mean, we know that a lot of SaaS business and data-driven businesses would be impacted by DPPV. Yeah. In which case, arguably, you should get into if you can go and crack it there, you can crack it anywhere, just as a devil's advocate there.
See, I'll go first because I've spent a couple of years in Brussels and a couple of years in the UK. Vivek, Europe is a market, as a region, is an aging population. Decision-making is slow. When I worked with ING Bank in Brussels, no decision was made within 6 months. Okay? This is urgent, means this is going to go live, or the decision is going to be taken after 6 months, right? So that's one big bottleneck. And this is fairly uniform across Europe. Maybe if it's 6 months in Brussels, maybe it's 4 months in the UK, right? But it's not like 4 days. So A, the size of the market, 2, the demographic, it's an aging market, 3, the decision making is fairly slow. 4, it is also a hyper-regulated market, so that additionally puts a lot of burden. The labor laws in those markets are fairly onerous. And there you please divorce the UK from the rest of continental Europe. UK is a little more progressive. Continental Europe, for example, in places like Belgium and Ireland, etc., if you get retrenched, the company, at least a few decades ago, the company had to pay you a year's salary, right? So it's very different. I mean, if you look at the French laws, you can't call your employees, German laws also, I think, after office hours. Now, talk to any Indian entrepreneur and tell her that after 5:30, आप किसी को call नहीं कर सकते हो. Otherwise, you'll be penalized heavily, right? Just get a lipstick reaction, right? And your smile says it all. Yeah. Let others speak on it.
The consultant obviously is calling his team all the time.
We have not faced. I mean, I wish our customers were like this.
So everything that he said, but I want to add one more thing, right? If you look at Europe, it is some 15 odd countries which matter. Honestly, all these countries are tiny. I mean, the size of like, I think you made a comment, size of Malad, right? There is no scale really, except for maybe UK, Spain, Italy, but then they're completely different cultures, right? So Europe as a unit, I don't think you can go to Europe and say, I'm going to attack Europe. You'll have to decide the country, number one. And honestly, other than UK, I don't see much going on over there for all the same reasons that Avinash mentioned.
Understood. Good.
Yeah, I mean, completely second their thoughts. In fact, I joke that, India is like Europe. Every few hundred kilometers, you have language, cuisine, everything changes, right? So you have to adapt, accordingly. And if you really look at the noise around Brexit also was because of the fact that many of the European businesses themselves were, UK registered for ease of doing business. Things like to Avinash's point, Germany, you cannot, if you're a startup, you cannot shut down that business because you cannot terminate people, right? So it's so much more harder. Somebody sitting in here, you are, 24/7, you're on a treadmill, and you say that after 5:30 you have to snap. You just
Very
can't
difficult to
right?
operate.
And the fact that there is so much of opportunity lying all around, why do you want to get into a zone where it's like highly regulated and, and there is, tax inefficiency also in some ways in some of these markets?
Understood. Any helpful? I thought we should cover both sides. Quickly, I think the next question which I have, and we can go quickly around the room, is as you started looking at those markets and some of those flavors you touched upon in a previous conversation, what are the considerations or challenges or best practices in setting up businesses? Whether it is, and top of the things, one is regulatory, second is probably labor and talent. Third also is technology in terms of many of us are SaaS players and cloud, and how does that help you move across geographies? So just top 2-3 dimensions which came to my mind. But we can again quickly go around the room and take your views on what have been your considerations.
Sure. I think, especially on the FinTech and where you're serving financial institutions, there is a need for, you have to look at things like data localization. Most markets in the Middle East, for example, they have, very, very stringent data regulations. Like Saudi, everything has to be on soil. Many of the other markets are actually treading in that direction. But if you really apply the context with respect to what the population scale of those markets and, what does it take to run an infra, all of Asia, we run in one, setup in India, while in the Middle East zone, we have 4, data center zones, right? Because the regulatory requirements are such, you have to do it. So there is a cost imperative as well to this in terms of saying, do I invest ahead before getting the business? Because it's a chicken and egg where you need to demonstrate that you have set up this infrastructure, you have everything from a compliance standpoint that is to go with, even...
Just a quick follow through, does the cloud partnerships help you in this area?
Not really. I mean, they are very, very far and few in between.
Okay.
You would have, even if they are a public cloud company, it will get co-badged as something else locally there. Right?
But for example, in AWS or most of the clouds in India, they are offering you a localization option.
So there is, that's what, right? So if you have, let's say, Azure, for instance, has a big setup in Dubai, but Saudi doesn't take it.
Saudi doesn't, okay.
So it's not taken as a local hosting, right?
Right.
So I think, that's one aspect.
Okay.
And we have been, a lot of things that we take for granted, like for things that how efficiently we've moved in terms of some of the cloud aspects. Those markets are still bare metal markets in the way, banking technology is run. It's still very, very localized in the bank's data center and things like that. Very hard to change that mindset. So we are in a bunch of markets, we are engaged all the way at the regulator level to basically change that, right? They're okay with running loan management software in an Excel sheet than to put this on cloud, right? That's the,
mindset.
That's the mindset.
Also right? Volumes probably.
Yeah. And the other aspect is that I think we, there's also this aspect of how do you bring money back. So if you're an Indian incorporated company, we still don't have very efficient tax system where, market closer home, Bangladesh has like such exorbitant withholding tax that you feel like, why do you even want to do business there, right? Yeah. Or Egypt is going through a currency, challenge where they don't have dollars. So the best thing that I can do is get all my team members to go on an offsite to Egypt than trying to get that money back into India, right? So those are
Your
considerations.
investors will not be happy. Instead of getting money, you're getting offsides.
So those are considerations, because if you're not able to repatriate back the income, is as good as income not earned. It may be a very lucrative market, very high margin, but if the money is locked up, as good as not having that money, right? So I think those aspects go into a consideration in terms of evaluating which market to sort of you want to do it. But the good part is that, when you work in a regional sort of setup, you have, you just follow the trail of some of these companies. Typically, one company that, let's say you partner with a bank in the Middle East, they'll have 4 or 5 markets where they are present. They actually have a spillover. They naturally sort of take you. So if you do a good job, there's that other side of the benefit as well. So you can contract, let's say, in the UAE, but have 4 markets that get covered and things like that, right?
Understood. Ashok?
Yeah, again, contextual to our business really, because we make money on a per transaction basis. And for us, then population scale is important, right? Like if we are just licensing it, it's a very different game altogether. So when we are looking at countries, we are looking at large populations. So anything above, like, let's say 75 million odd people, so 2 Bombays or 3 Bombays, right? Is how we look at the minimum size. Second is we look at ARPU potential. A lot of these countries like Philippines, Indonesia, you can price easily about 5 to 10x India prices. So if you think about that, then Indonesia, which has 275 million odd people, you're pricing at, let's say, average of 5, 6x. That's the size of India there, right? In terms of potential revenue that you make. So it becomes very lucrative when you start looking at it as a multiplier effect, or ARPU times the number of people, or however you want to slice and dice that. Third, regulation is super important. If localization, I think, largely solved in the Southeast Asia regions, largely by Google or a GCP or an AWS and an Azure. In Middle East, exactly like he said, Saudi doesn't, you'll have to go with some local player there. Lot more difficult to do a single button push deployment into a Saudi, right? It's very hard. So we have to figure these things out. But if you're in any AWS or GCP region, for us, it's tomorrow I can take a country live. And that's the beauty of being on those clouds. And so we also kind of look at which countries has GCP entered or AWS entered, because that's a good trigger for us. The third element is, we didn't go to Bangladesh. We just didn't, because we can't take money out. So exactly what he said, right? 300 million people, brilliant country. They love Indians, but what do you do?
Also modernizing.
Modernizing, from a talent perspective, there is significant talent in Bangladesh as compared, even tech talent, right? Yeah. Bangladesh has far better tech talent than let's say, Philippines. I can't hire tech talent in Philippines. Neither can I in Indonesia. Vietnam, amazing. But Vietnam, again, is difficult because the culture is so different. They love the Chinese. We don't, So even though they fought with them. But so you kind of also are kind of looking at which countries respect India a little bit, where an Indian goes and they think that it's great. That's how we select. But also we realized something else. We tried something different about 2 years ago, where we tried to do broad-based. It failed miserably. Broad-based as in go to 10 countries at the same time. I don't think you will get a customer in each country. It doesn't mean you've gone international. Really, it is about dominating a region. And you'll never dominate a region by doing broad-based, in my opinion.
Like spray and pray. Like spray and pray.
Spray and pray didn't work, and I think we learned, we have scars to show for that.
Sure. Useful.
Just quickly adding to what Madhu and Ashok said, couple of other considerations is the country a welfare state? Right? Because that determines the attitude towards profit and the repatriation challenge. It's clearly, and that's one of the reasons why we look at the US favorably. They are both positively dispensed towards profits, and profits being made by free enterprise, even if it's an Indian company, right? So I think that's a very important consideration, because if you're going to scale in that geography and tomorrow suddenly the laws change and something comes in retrospectively also, what do? You'll be sort of stuck. So US has a history of being fairly capitalist in its mindset. And that at least for an enterprise going, looking to set up shop there, and do business is good. The other thing, especially for a spend management company, is to look at how do aspects in terms of profit pools and revenue pools look like, right? And this profit pool concept is extremely important because ultimately, whatever market that you go, it may take you a couple of years to, set up your business there. But how are you going to make money there? Right? And as a listed company, it's especially important for us. And there, one of the considerations that we because in India, we make money through software fees, but we also make a lot of our revenues from transaction income. So how are aspects like interchange, et cetera, looked at in the market? If there's a capping on interchange in that market, the overall quantum of revenue and consequently profit is artificially limited by the regulator, right? And that essentially means that, whosoever you're partnering with, a partner bank or a Visa, MasterCard, et cetera, whosoever is helping you execute those spends in those geographies is going to squeeze you that much more. Your scale opportunity goes down. So those are specific considerations, as Ashok mentioned, depending on your business. Is it a B2B? Is it a B2C? Is it SaaS? Is it a spend management company? You need to sort of distill down and see where are you going to make money, and when you make money, how's the local government and the diaspora there, the locals, react to it? Are they going to be okay with it, or are they going to be vengeful and not happy about it?
Perfect.
Just one last comment, Vivek, that I think in this whole aspect of, since I touched on tax also, right? GIFT is actually coming out to be like a blessing, where a lot of these arbitrages around tax and how efficiently you can run. I think a lot of promise is there, and they've been like super efficient. Our interactions, with the IFC team have been that they want to enable. So even if the rules don't permit today, they are taking that feedback, and I think in like a few years' time, I think that could be a gateway to how Indian businesses actually operate internationally.
I agree. Thanks for bringing that up. We're almost on the hour. So last question really is, what could help you're doing whatever you're doing as a private enterprise? From an industry body perspective, government perspective, policy perspective, GIFT you already touched upon. What else, if there was an ask from all of you, one or two asks, what would that be to support Indian fintech expanding more strongly globally?
So, I mean, I think there is this whole drive around, brand India getting built out. I often say this, like India is seen as the fintech factory for the world, where a lot of ideas that has got tested in India at our population scale, it becomes very, very efficient in a number of markets. So if you look at pockets of regions, right, ASEAN, barring 4 countries in that 10-country group, several of them are poor. They have very similar demographic challenges, whether it's in Indonesia or Cambodia and things like that, where they're still grappling with challenges around how efficiently you can build a microfinance product, right? So we've actually gone through that rigor of actually building efficient tech, where tech can be this great leveler in terms of how you can drive inclusion. So there's a lot of that's going well for us, both at a macro level, where the government and the policymakers are saying, this is what we have done. I think there's a collective effort that is required. I think all of us, whether it's Ashok or us or anybody else, in our individual capacity, we're going out and doing our BD effort, but how do we build some properties around how it can be collectively shown as a strength? And China did this. If you actually just have to just shamelessly learn from them, it was private companies, but wherever Chinese tourists went, you will find WeChat and Alipay very widely accepted, right? So the dollar did the difference, right? So therefore, even for us, we should actually try and do that in a certain way. So I've been sort of interacting with folks to say, how do we actually create something like India FinTech Week, where we can, some of us can actually go to, let's say, in Indonesia and demonstrate what we have built in India and how it can actually help those businesses, right? And we can do this in every market where we feel that there is a opportunity to solve, right? And just in this morning, speaking to the IAMI folks to say, how do we anchor this as an effort rather than us, while we continue to do what we are doing individually?
Makes sense.
I'm usually the kind of guy who says, stay out of business. Government should not be, getting in the way. But in specifically on international kind of expansion, I do feel, if you look at the US and the way that they try to bring US companies there, like let's say the embassy, and get them to visit these countries together, the government plays a big part in building that brand US tech. I think we're starting to do it. I think we can do it in a very big way and almost position that we are big. I don't think the world knows we are big yet. They think China is big, they think US is big, they think Europe is big. But the India brand is still, maybe I'm doing it in a silo, he's doing it in a silo, Madhu's doing it in a silo.
Yeah.
We're not doing it together. And that's where I think, can the ambassadors in these countries bring us to come and drive narratives, right? And I think that's super important, in my opinion. And UK does that really well. UK, I think it's called the UK India, something, and they push products, UK products to India, right? Like, we should be doing the same. Second, I think tax. Just be a lot more tax friendly than what we are as a country. Especially international tax, because we have withholding tax in the countries that we are at. I think it's just a pain dealing with, cross-border tax issues. I don't think we have it cleared out yet.
Helpful. Sure.
So I think Madhu and Ashok more or less covered the things. So one thing that I want to highlight, which is being done, which is great, right, is the Gift City opportunity. And we are very actively considering working with the Gift City beyond just setting up an office there. We want to do something a lot more meaningful, and we are in discussions with the Gift City itself. I think it's a brilliant initiative, and I would encourage and urge more and more tech companies, and especially FinTech companies, to fully exploit that platform that's been created. I mean, the number of benefits that the Gift City today offers to a company which is, Gift City registered, and you could have an office there or something like that, is just mind-boggling. So time is short, so I'd expect more and more of Indian entrepreneurs to explore that opportunity.
Super. Thank you.